April 24th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. First up is vote minutes. Do we have minutes to vote?
No minutes.
We don't, so we're gonna move on. We have an executive session that we're waiting on town council,
Correct.
so
I make a motion to table.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to table that for later in the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. I'd like to take a moment to make an announcement. Sadly, today, we lost our illustrious colleague and chairperson, Mary Schumacher, passed away this morning. If I could we have a moment of silence for Mary? Okay, thank you. First up is a request for a continuance under a notice of intent. Ardith WeWorka, 14 McKinley Drive, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to remove existing patio and patio and construct new addition with new stairs and all associated excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until the next May, so May 1st.
So
May.
moved.
May 1st.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Next up, request for determination of applicability. First one is Stephen and Karen, I'm sorry, I'm gonna slaughter this. Gochias, 42 Eel River Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to install a shed and build a patio.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous. Next up, David and Allison Ward, 21 Patty Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to repair the failed septic system by replacing existing leach pit with a leach trench.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous. Next up, Peter Chase, Francis Doohan, mooring number 37, Great Harbor, Woods Hole, Mass, for permission to install a 20 by 32 work float to grow oysters.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. Martha Hamilton, 8 Burgess Street, West Falmouth, Mass, for permission to conduct general maintenance to existing licensed pier.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. George Collins, 114 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to replace one piling on an existing licensed dock.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. Continued request for determination of applicability. Franklin Stearns, 322 Surf Drive, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade septic system to a tight tank.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the staff is recommending a +3 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed. To explain this, the property is located on the water side of Surf Drive. The existing septic system system is within a coastal dune, so the staff is slightly uncomfortable without being able to condition the project to protect the dune. There's also kind of a fairly lengthy history on the project that I think the board should be aware of. That said, I mean, we don't have any objections to installing the tight tank. I just want to make sure the dune is protected.
Okay, everybody understand
So they'll
that?
be filing a notice of intent.
Well, if
Well, we have
you
to,
vote
we
it,
have to
Okay.
vote.
I
So I'll-
believe the
so I'll make
applicant's
a motion.
engineer.
I'll make a motion to accept staff's recommendation of a positive determination.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Jamie,
Sorry.
I want an opportunity to speak, please. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. Mr. Stearns, I wanted to give you some additional information about the project that I hope will persuade you that an RDA is appropriate. If I could, I just wanted to show you a single photograph. And just briefly discuss the project. I'm joined tonight by Jonathan Searles from Francisco Tavares, who was the contractor. On Monday night, we went to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health voted to approve the tight tank. I respectfully disagree with Jen's concerns about impacts to the dune. If you look at the photo that's on the screen, to the right of the house is vegetation and dune. To the left is some cedars, vegetation, and dune. And of course, the house was built on a dune, we all know that, but this house was built in the early 1950s. It has always had 2 bedrooms and a kitchen, and it has a cesspool. We've went over this extensively with Jonathan, and the plan contemplates a very surgical installation that'd be right under this driveway area, which is paved. We would install steel sheeting, and the excavation would be contained within the steel sheeting. The material would be baled directly onto trucks and hauled away. The work would be done at low tide, so we're not concerned about dewatering. And we would like an opportunity to get this done sooner than later, just because the sooner it's done, the sooner an oil-filled cesspool is no longer being used. I understand Jen's concerns, but Mr. Searles is here if there's specific questions, and I know that these are limited to 5 minutes, so I'm trying to talk fast, because if it takes longer than 5, it shouldn't be an RDA, but I think it's an RDA. You know, the work limit would be right on the edges of the driveway. There's no need to do anything near the dunes at all. So I'm hopeful that you could, even though I generally would never file an RDA that I thought would be positive, I was initially led to believe that an RDA was appropriate when I had some initial meetings with staff. So if we file a notice, it's going to translate to 4 or 6 weeks before we close a hearing and then get an order of conditions. So it would put it right into the busy summer season. So I was just hoping that you could reconsider that with all respect.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Mike, how are you going to abandon the existing septic system?
We're going to just cut the pipe and leave it in the ground. We're not
That is
touching
not
it.
what the Board of Health has asked you to do. I spoke with the Board of Health today. They want you to abandon and fill the system.
Well, we can do that. The
So
system.
why would you tell the board, when the Board of Health gave you direction to pump the system, why would you tell this board you're just going to cut the pipe?
Actually, I did tell the board that we were just going to cut the pipe. I told the board that we had no intention of doing anything but abandoning it in place. If necessary, we can fill it with sand without interfering at all with the dune, because the cesspool is located with a hatch right underneath this boardwalk that's removable, so it can be pumped. We could pump it and fill it with sand without doing any disruption to the dune.
Okay.
The red dot is the actual cesspool, and this section of the walkway has a hatch that allows you to reach down and pump it. So
It
we could-
does?
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you would just fill it with the sand?
Flowable fill.
Flowable fill? As long as the dune's not being impacted. I didn't realize the boardwalk was there. I didn't go to the site, Mike. I just thought you would have to dig into the dune.
Yeah,
You're sure there's no digging in that dune at all?
absolutely. And I went to the site today after I had a conversation with Mr. Stearns, and he directed me to where the hatch is for that. under this.
And you
would-
looked at where the hatch was?
Yes. And right here, the dune does rise up, and if the cover of the tank is off the dune, so that there'd be no need to do any digging.
If the dune doesn't have to be touched, how would you get the sand in there,
Well,
or the fill?
maybe Jonathan could describe how you install the flowable fill. It's
Yeah,
basically
that's
like,
You know how big it is?
no, we don't know how big it is, but a typical cesspool is about 5-foot diameter and about 5 feet deep, made out of block.
How would you fill it?
For the record, my name is Jonathan Searles with Francisco Tavares. I would actually use our sandbagging machine. We're actually using it on another project right now at the end of Davis Necks. So this machine, what it creates is a water mixed slurry with the sand. So the machine would stay in the work zone in the front, and we would pump the sand into the leach pit and basically forcing the water back through and the sand up. So we wouldn't have to do any machine operating in that area.
If the dune isn't impacted, Mr. Chairman, we'll revise our recommendation for a negative.
Great.
But I would like staff to meet on site with the contractor to review the work methodology prior to that then. It's just awfully close to that dune. Okay?
You're gonna withdraw your,
Yeah, so I'll withdraw my motion.
I'll withdraw my second.
Now, make a new motion to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination.
Second.
Courtney?
Yeah, just, so to confirm, the tank would be pumped, and you could set up your pump out in the
Correct.
driveway?
Yep.
So they don't have to disturb, and then you're gonna pump the flowable fill in. Fair enough, there's no disturbance. That's good.
One last question, is the driveway gonna have a hatch where you can reach the tight tank underneath or some sort of,
It'll be level with the ground.
yeah, is it gonna have,
The tight tank has to have a steel, like sewer cover, a manhole cover to grade, and
Okay.
you actually have to, one of the conditions of the approval that the Board of Health requires you to record on the deed is that you have a long-term pumping contract, and that it's pumped on
Okay.
twice during the summer, and then it's also fitted with an alarm at 3/5 full in the event something happens and there's more water use than typical, it would alert the owner to have it pumped.
okay, that's fine.
And there's a battery backup for the alarm if the power goes out.
That I don't know.
Should be. I'd like to see that condition,
That's
particularly given that exposure.
There's no condition on an RDA.
Well, I know, so.
That's the only thing I can't
I'm-
really,
I've
What do
never
you-
seen a battery backup on one of those alarms,
I haven't either.
because usually if,
Called a generator.
yeah,
Well, I will also tell you that this tank is a 3,000-gallon tank, and that you're required to size it to be 500% of the daily flow. The daily flow is 220, so let's just say 5 times that is 1,000. We've got a 3,000-gallon tank, so we way oversized it just for that, to mitigate against that concern of there ever being a need to pump it more than, twice a summer.
Anybody else? Okay, so the motion is for a -2,
Two.
and we have a second.
Betsy made the motion, I seconded
That's
it.
for a negative determination.
Correct.
These numbers are all
So the
very
positive been
confusing to
withdrawn.
me.
Okay. Okay, we good?
Yep.
Okay, all those in
Staff.
favor of a -2, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jen, for reconsidering that.
All right. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up is request for hearings under notice of intent is Ardith Wewerko, which is continued to May. Next up, Plantin Belonius, Maria Lamprose, 154 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to raise, R-A-Z-E, and reconstruct the existing dwelling and all associated clearing, grading, and landscaping. Time's up. Hey, we're not messing around
Hey,
here.
Mike, no, we just move along.
I will submit the abutters cards after my presentation. For the
That's fine.
record, my name is Michael Borselli, Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant, Maria Belonius, who's in the audience tonight. Maria owns the property at 154 Edgewater Drive East. There's an existing single-family dwelling on the property. It has water frontage on Childs River. Resource areas are land under the ocean. There's 2 strips of salt marsh. There's a coastal bank. There's land subject to tidal action. All of the associated A and B zones are on the plan. There's also a portion of the lot that's land subject to coastal storm flowage, and it's AE 13, and it's shown as a blue line that meanders through the site and crosses through the house. This is a redevelopment project, and it was designed very specifically in accordance with your regs at 10.18. By that I mean that the architect and the owner and I worked very, very meticulously to not increase the impervious surfaces on the lot. In your package is an existing conditions plan, as well as a proposed plan. And there's also 2 11x17 exhibits that go through the impervious surface calculations. You've seen me submit these before. They color code existing and proposed. In this case is the proposed house. The blue area is all the new impervious in an A zone. The tan is all the new impervious in a B zone. And there's a companion plan, and I don't have the technology to put them both on the screen, but there's a companion plan. This is the proposed situation, and the existing situation is, that's a proposed again, I'm sorry. The existing is shown, and you can they're almost indistinguishable, but Maria was very cognizant of the need to do mitigation planting and designed it so that we wouldn't need to provide mitigation planting. None of the proposed structure moves closer to the wetland resources than the closest point of the existing dwelling. We're proposing to rebuild the deck on the side. The generator, and if there were one, or we know that the air conditioning units will be under the deck. This is a 1-story walkout, so the deck has a full height below it, and the AC condensers are proposed to be right at the edge of the deck, but underneath the footprint of the deck. There's no vegetation proposed to be cut or removed as part of this application. The existing septic system has been reviewed by the health department and found to be adequate and satisfactory. There's no increase in bedrooms. I show the limit of work on the plan. I also show that there'll be dry wells to contain runoff. And there's no increase in driveway. The same driveway will be used on this project. I think that sums up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Speaking of the driveway, Mike, just on the north side of the house, I saw some pretty severe runoff, and it's kind of pitched towards the neighbor's driveway. Is there any way to kind of deal with that at the end of the driveway where the garage is?
Was it in this location?
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that too. When this There will be some removal right at the edge, of course, when they do the demolition. When the new house is built, it's gonna be very slightly higher than the existing house, so when the new driveway is paved, it can be pitched, so it pitches the, away from that.
All right. And, is there gonna be a rinse station underneath the new deck where you're talking about the generators?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be in this location, under
Right.
this deck.
Mike, you don't have to go to ZBA because you're only 3.5 feet off that property boundary, do you?
We do have to go to ZBA. We have filed.
You have filed with
Ahmed
ZBA?
Flower Law Firm has filed a special permit
Okay,
application.
thank you. No further questions, unless you had anything
No,
else?
that's it.
No, we're good.
I have no comments.
I have a question to Brendan. Did you have a chance to check the existing permits for the deck?
Yeah,
and
it's all, everything checks out.
Okay, no further questions.
Steve?
Mr. Chairman, my question was about the side yard setback. It's not in our purview, but I was just curious whether
Yeah, on
there's
this,
an opportunity to move the house away from
well,
that property line.
this side yard setback is only 3.7 feet, the minimum's 10. If we were to rebuild and honor the setback, it would push the house closer to the wetlands unless you move the house completely back, which then would diminish the view. There's a view downriver. So, because of that, we've applied to the Board of Appeals to, you can apply for a special permit to rebuild to the same position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all I had.
Okay.
Yes,
That's
Jimmy?
I had,
Just working out the ZBA in my head.
Well, if they file with the ZBA, they
I
have to.
understand, but
yeah.
all right, I'm sorry, Betsy. If ZBA declines it, then
They'll need to come
Then
back
they'll
to
have to
us.
come back.
plan.
They'll have to come back.
yeah,
I don't know if they would. You're up.
well, it's not up to us, it's out of our hand. So, yeah, I'm glad that you can deal with that runoff.
Yeah.
And my only other comment is, right now, there's a walkway around the house that you don't have indicated here,
Yes.
and I'm assuming you're not gonna have it, because you don't have it on the
Correct.
plan?
All we're gonna have, and if you, yes, that's on the existing conditions plan, that's to be removed. and
Right.
It's built into the impervious surface calcs. All we're gonna have is 2 stepping stone, bluestones right here,
Okay.
to the front porch.
Thanks, that's it.
Lori?
Mike, what's the existing, the proposed elevation of the new house?
It's
First
going
floor?
to be, the first floor is gonna be 14. It's required to be 1 foot above.
Okay,
the
because you just
base.
didn't have it on the plan.
It's on the, sorry about that,
The
it's on
next
the.
question I have, what are the age of the cesspools?
I don't know.
And the only reason I'm asking this, with the project that you're doing all this work there, cesspools have a, I mean, we know how long they live. I mean, I would just, while you're there, if it was something you could consider, I would upgrade your septic system at this time, because once you get this all done and they fail, if they do fail, then you're ripping everything up again. And, I mean, I don't know what year that house was built, but cesspools haven't been put in. I mean, these aren't even leach pits, these are cesspools. So they were put in, you know, maybe the 40s or 50s. And, you know, you're already talking old. So they're probably, they might be fine, but I don't think if it were me, if it was my project, I know I wouldn't be leaving 2 old cesspools. It's like building a house on a bad foundation. So that's just, I know you don't have to do it, but you might want to consider it in this project at some point. That's all.
Kevin?
No questions.
Courtney?
I would absolutely concur with Maureen's comment. Other than that, I have no other questions, and I'll move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Well, I had one more question, just one. Has this been in the same ownership in the family forever?
You got to
Okay.
come up here if you want to speak, Maria.
Upgrade it.
Mr.
sorry for your loss. I
Thank
could
you.
feel the pain. We bought the house in 2010.
And you didn't have to upgrade?
No, I mean, it's been looked at before we bought the house because it had to be, and we maintained it ever since. And I personally went in and I spoke to the health department about our project. We're trying really hard to, we didn't realize we'd be rebuilding. We'd never wanted to do this, but the house is really falling apart, and I think we were mesmerized by the water, and we didn't see the house when we bought it. So that's really what happened. It's a fact. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to put back what we have. If you had a chance to look at the plan, you'd see that we're not even moving the kitchen or a bedroom or anything, really. The house is just going right back the way it is because we really like it. And if we don't have to spend money on the cesspool, and I understand that it might be penny wise, pound foolish, but if I can just concentrate on getting the house rebuilt, because things are falling apart, the roof needs to be done, the siding is gone. There's a lot of real serious structural concerns that if I can leave the cesspool for a future, I should just do that. And since the health department didn't have a problem with it,
So it was inspected and had a, yeah, okay.
I can answer to
Yeah.
that.
But just have it on your list.
it is on our list.
It will be on your list.
And
Yeah,
it
right.
might just end up on our list, and we were hoping that maybe the town would kick in and bring town sewer before it hits our list. No?
Don't hold your
Don't
breath.
hold your breath.
Don't hope for that, okay.
Board of
And
Health's gonna
20.
review it anyways.
Yes.
I think so.
I second Courtney's
Yep.
motion to close.
Mark?
I just have a quick question, Mike. Where does the mean high water line come from on your plots?
The Save Buzzards Bay folks publish elevations based on tide gauges that they've set up that relate to the datum system we use, which is NAVD88. And those published elevations, we measure the elevations on the waterfront, so we can interpolate in where the mean high water is based on that information.
So you actually, as surveyor, your surveyor crew actually draws the line on the map, is that right?
The surveyors measure the elevations on the beach area. We know the elevation, so we're able to interpolate the line in between the shots so we effectively survey mean high water.
Curious, because I've seen so many plots where, when you're actually on site, it's not necessarily mean high water, but the water's a lot higher than,
Well, mean high water's statistical mean. There's higher high tides, there's lower high tides, but it's an accepted publication based on the work that Buzzards Bay Coalition did.
thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board?
Just to make one slight
Comment?
correction, it's the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program, not the
Never-
Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Mark, I can send you that link. Okay? That's it.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of closing the hearing, taken under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
And you're gonna give me the cards, aren't you, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Next up, Connor McLaughlin, Falmouth Pier 37, Inc., number 88 and 110 Scranton Ave, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to construct a three-sided retaining wall which will be filled to create a level lawn.
I have a picture to show.
Is that,
Thank you. For the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. I prepared this plan for Connor McLaughlin, who's the owner of the property, is sitting here with us. Boathouse. The property is site of this proposed project abuts Falmouth Inner Harbor. It's in this grassed area right here, seen on the aerial photo. It's in a highly developed area, paved on all sides around it. This is the Pier 37 boat racks here with a large concrete surface, the boathouse restaurant. This area where there's more parking and boat storage. Little house here, it's at number 110. Right adjacent to the site we're talking about. And then south of here on Inner Harbor is the Falmouth boat ramp and the harbor master's quarters. This is the only grassy area on this site, and I'll stress several times that it's going to remain a grassed surface. There's this area. Basically, most of the water frontage is armored along the entire harbor, except maybe on the other side where Deacon's Ave. But you have bulkheads and all. You have the town boat ramp here. Further south, it's all bulkheaded and piered, and north, it's all bulkhead all the way around. And then this other one site here, which is you have a dumped stone armoring on the bank that's in that location. Zoom in a little. At this time, there's vegetation. There's the leaves are coming out nicely on the invasive species, bittersweet and honeysuckle and all that's down in there right now. There is a path running between the two, and there's a path, or a circuit that people can walk most of the way around the harbor. I'm not sure how continuous it is, but it's along a lot of it. And this path is to remain, and it's not really mentioned in here, shown, but part of this project would be just to smooth this path out a little bit to keep it passable. And this project is in flood hazard zone AE. There's our site plan. So out over the Inner Harbor, the flood zone is AE elevation 18, and just inland from this flood zone line here is AE elevation 14, which runs up the slope to the flood zone, this contour elevation 14 in this location here. So what he's proposing to build is a retaining wall which will run, basically it starts as a retaining wall here at the boat racks. It will start in this location, run along the existing, there's a timber retaining wall here now. It'll run along this location, across, and then back, and return into the foundation of this house. It will be slightly lower than the surface of the pavement that's right here. It'll be basically 14 and just a little bit lower, so there'll be no runoff. There'll be no runoff from this site onto the pavement. There is a catch basin, a leaching catch basin in this location in the paved area. But the point of this is to create a level lawn area which will, there'll be no runoff from this surface. It'll be planted with drought-tolerant. In the narrative, I mentioned the sod. Request that you allow sod to be placed there, but on this plan, right here, it says loam and seed, but I'd like to request that we could sod it on the 8 inches of loam rather than grass seed. But it will be placed above compacted, well-drained granular material. There'll be no stormwater from this site. As I've said, the gutter on the north side of this building, which now flows It has one downspout that just flows out onto the paved area, and the downspout from, what's this, the inland, the northwest corner, does go underground, but is piped into this catch basin that's right here, which seems rather full, and actually it seems like it has a direct discharge through a small pipe out to the harbor. So that stormwater runoff from this side of the house will be eliminated from going there, and it'll be going to these dry wells under the lawn. There are a couple utility poles in this location here, and one down just below where the lawn is proposed by the path. Those will be removed, and any of the wires will be put underground. This area right here, the pavement currently comes to this location here. So this pavement will be removed and will become filled with this, the lawn area. That pavement will be removed, and that's 2 parking spaces, or parts of 2 parking spaces. And so we're proposing to put in this area just a pervious, this area has to be lowered a little bit because right now it starts to slope up the hill. So it'll be graded down and put in some pervious pavers in this location, so you can have the 2 parking spaces right here rather than over there. And this, what we've shown right here, is a 2-foot wide trench that we have to cut the pavement back to build the wall, and that will be backfilled with the drainage stone, so that will decrease runoff from this location. And there's an overall reduction in coverage of about 37 square feet from this project. No mitigation is required, but we have put, it'll help make the path nicer, put in some of the Amelanchier, show on the plan Amelanchier laevis, but I'd actually like to substitute that with the Amelanchier canadensis, which is lower growing in this location. I think they'll do fine there, because actually this face of the wall faces southeast, so it's not going to get too hot there. Nothing was proposed here because that's a southwest facing wall. I think that would be probably too hot to grow in anything in that location. On top of the wall, you have a tempered glass railing system going along there, which will be meet building code requirements. So being in the flood zone, there's an area of this bank right through here which exceeds 10%, so it's considered a coastal bank. And say this bank does not perform all of the functions sometimes associated with a coastal bank. That is, it is not a source for any sediment for any downstream beaches. There are no downstream beaches from this location. Beaches, barrier beaches, or dunes, and this certainly does not provide any sediment source, and nobody would want sediment going into the harbor. It has, since it's compacted loam with kind of a poor grassy surface on it, it has no particular wildlife habitat value. It does serve as a vertical buffer to storm damage, for storm damage prevention, and substituting that storm damage prevention with a different vertical buffer, meaning the retaining wall, this will, the storm damage prevention aspect of this bank, which is the only function it serves, will not be diminished, and I'd say it can be enhanced as being a stronger buffer against storm damage prevention, or buffer against storm damage, I should say. And I would note that under the State Wetland Protection Act does allow bulkheads revetment seawalls and groins on such, is a section that's referring to coastal banks that are not a sediment source. They specifically say that bulkheads, revetment seawalls on such non-eroding coastal banks are allowed or may be permitted. That language is not in your regulations, but that the state does make a distinction between coastal banks which serve as sediment source as a form of storm damage prevention, in which case seawalls and groins and revetment are not allowed, but on a coastal bank that does not serve as a sediment source, walls and revetments may be allowed. Currently, is that it's a compacted grass. A lot of people walk up and down this slope, partly because of the path is there, and maybe to get to their boat slippers or something else. And so one item that comes up in both the Falmouth wetland regulations and the state regulations is to reduce the amount of pedestrian and vehicular traffic on a coastal bank. And that is another benefit of this project, that there'll be no pedestrians going up and down this bank, no compaction on a bank, and erosion and blowouts because of what we're doing. So again, this will eliminate any runoff from this grass area, and it will still remain as a grass area. So there's no diminution in the vegetated area due to this project. In the Falmouth wetland regulations, I can go through some of them in this is from coastal banks. Significant storm damage prevention. It does list all coastal banks in one. Coastal banks that supply sediment to coastal beaches are per se significant, but this is not that type of coastal bank, as it does not supply any sediment. While erosion caused by wave action is an integral part of the shoreline processes and furnish important sediment to downdrift landforms, again, it doesn't. Erosion of a coastal bank by wind and rain runoff, which plays only a minor role, should not be increased unnecessarily. And so again, we are decreasing the wind and rain runoff, or eliminating the wind and rain runoff. Therefore, disturbances to a coastal bank which reduce its natural resistance to wind and rain erosion cause cuts and gullies, risk of collapse, etc. And of course, this project will have the opposite effect. And later it talks about pedestrian vehicular traffic. And say, well, we're eliminating pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Under definitions, critical 2D, when the commission determines that a coastal bank is significant to storm damage prevention and flood control, because it is a vertical buffer to stormwaters, the stability of the bank, i.e. the natural resistance of the bank to erosion caused by wind and rain runoff, is critical to the protection of the resource area values. Again, we're eliminating wind and rain runoff. There is one area where presumptions, to rebut the presumptions of significance in 1031, which is part of the introduction, banks that supply coastal sediment. This bank does not supply sediment. It is a vertical buffer, but that effect will not be reduced. It will actually be enhanced. And again, the presumptions there include wind and rain runoff will be reduced to nil, as I've said. So I think that this bank, and also the traffic which might compact or erode the bank, will also be reduced. So I think that this bank technically is a bank by slope, but its function has only one function as a vertical buffer, and that function as a vertical buffer is being increased and safe, and some of the effect of this project will have a reduction in any possible problems as again, as far as pedestrian or vehicular traffic on the bank. There are in 1037, most of the areas where this type of work would be not permitted. It's not an eroding coastal bank. It's not a portion of a coastal bank within a V zone. It's not, the slope is not greater or equal to 4 to 1. But then we do get to two areas, that portion of a coastal bank which is in 100 feet of land under the ocean. And I would say to that, and then the following one, which is in 75 feet of land subject to tidal action, we are within both of those. But this area, this one bank, the harbor itself is so highly developed that this condition for not doing work on a coastal bank, which is within 75 or 100 feet of such a highly developed land under the ocean or subject to tidal action, is, I hope you can see your way to realizing that this last bit, that this proposed work will not cause damage, and I believe will actually increase the safeguards and reduce the possible impacts from any runoff or erosion which might go into the harbor or the buffer zones. And as I said, it's a reduction in impervious surface, reduction in runoff. Some of the roof runoff will be going into dry wells in this location under here. And I believe that this is a project that could be permitted with proper conditions. Thank you.
How tall is the wall gonna be, Tom? About 8 feet?
8 feet.
8 feet. So you gotta go through building, get a permit for that?
I'm not sure if it requires a permit. It'll meet building code as far as railings and
think,
safety
yeah,
along it.
Retaining wall is over 4 feet. I think you gotta go talk to Rod.
Yeah.
So, just a heads up on that one.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess I'll let you take the rest.
Tom, I found your argument to be interesting. Your analysis. Couple quick questions. Where's 88 Scranton Ave?
That's the boathouse. Rest.
So where's the property line? Between 88 and 110?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's 88 is there. There's, well, some things have changed with land court because this way has been extinguished by land court. There's no new plan out. This is 110, that's 88. There was a way between them, which land court is deemed is owned by the two abutting properties. So actually the property line go down the middle. So technically the property line is in the middle of this 30-foot wide
Okay.
way.
And when was that land court decision?
Well, there's not a plan out yet. There's no plan, and I'm not sure exactly when the ruling came down, but it's I've been told
So
by.
your plan, so all plans still show an actual way with no ownership? Okay,
The plans do, yes.
okay. What is the area gonna be used for?
Immediately, just talking with Connor, he was gonna put picnic tables out there. He can, for takeout meals from the restaurant, the boathouse, can be, people could take them out there and eat out on that
Is the
grassy.
boathouse allowed to encroach on 110 Scranton Ave as opposed to 88? I know, what is it, Board of Health or zoning? One of them planning, someone regulates where a restaurant can and cannot be, and I'm wondering if your client has applied to those particular boards for an expanded use of the restaurant on 88 or 110 Scranton Ave.
Connor McLaughlin, I'm the manager of Boathouse Restaurant. We don't plan on this year offering any type of service. It would just be picnic tables for the public use in this year, just a grass service and picnic tables for public use, that if people want to come to the restaurant and take out food and eat by the harbor, they're welcome to, but we're not going to offer service out there or extend our services to that location.
How about people waiting for tables with drinks?
There will not be drink service or allowed to be, you cannot have an alcoholic drink off the premises. So it hasn't been licensed by the ABCC to be an alcohol premises. We would have to.
That's where I'm getting at.
We would have to come in the future and actually continue. We're gonna have the glass wall, as we discussed, to kind of maintain the view and keep a nice fascia. It really is just about, honestly, it's about the customer safety, because it's not really a good flow of where people should walk and go. And it's really not usable. It's just a 30-degree pitch into the water. So we figured if we could put the wall up, we just put some picnic tables there and allow people this year to do it, and then in the future, discuss what's possible. But really, just the goal of this is just to build a wall and create a designated, a public walkway path. It's a safe path that's already there, but can be better distinguished and better maintained, to go across that land and then up the street here and then through the town to maintain that walk path around the harbor.
Okay. Tom? You're filling a coastal bank, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I wasn't a fan of this project coming out of the gate. The more I look at it, it's only a 30-foot, or what, 45-foot span between both those bulkheads? Something like that?
Which, here to here?
30, yeah, it's like around
It's
30 feet.
42 or so feet.
Okay. I'll let the board decide what they want to do about the coastal bank issue. My concern is, and you might want to stand, Connor, is the intense amount of work already being done on that property without a permit. There was a large amount of fill on that site. It was not protected. If we had had a very heavy rain like we did the other day, I don't know when that fill showed up, so I don't know if it was there last weekend during the heavy rains that we had. Yes, I know the silt fence went in after I called today, so I do appreciate the prompt response to my phone call, but I feel that it's because you were appearing tonight. So I'd like to know why the work was starting to be done without a valid permit.
The work wasn't starting to be done. I actually printed pictures, if you'd like me to hand, of the.
When was the
what
fill
you
placed on
already
the
know.
site, Connor?
Well, basically, all that fill is the concrete work that we did. If you could go to
When did you do the work?
picture, that's been being done over the last 4 months. And Dave and Mr. Ficillo, who did the concrete work, just wrapped up about a week or two ago. And I don't know, his crew was in charge of moving that dirt, and instead of moving it off property to bring it back in, we had talked about keeping it on property. I wasn't aware, honestly, I haven't been around, I wasn't aware that it was kept actually on the grass and not like maybe a little closer in towards the asphalt. But I take full responsibility. Again, the minute I realized there wasn't a silt fence there, I went and purchased the products and placed it, and I also ordered hay bales, which I have copies of the receipts that are coming in on Thursday, because they weren't in stock today. So I take full responsibility, but it's not fill that we brought in to start this project. It was fill that when we pulled all this concrete from all along in front of the boat rack and then all up towards where the offices is on Pier 37, and all that land got all new concrete work. When they dug up all the asphalt, they took the dirt from under the asphalt and saved it so we could reuse it instead of hauling it out to haul new dirt in. It was just trying to be,
I understand that, but when we looked at that project, that was not what we were told, that you would be stockpiling the fill right there, or we would have taken precautions to protect the harbor. In the intense rains we had last weekend, did you notice any of the runoff going into the harbor, or did we even care to look?
No, I've been on that property a handful of times in the last 2 weeks. I can't truthfully tell you the runoff level. I haven't noticed.
It was disappointing. I mean, the more I look at this project, the more I'm like, it's the inner harbor, it's a wall, the whole inner harbor is walled, Is this really gonna make that much of a difference? No. But to have that amount of activity on that site not being permitted was very discouraging, and this was not the day to discourage us. So,
Can I just ask you, was this bill taken from this lot?
Yes.
It was taken
it
from
was
88?
taken from 88.
110?
64 to 88 Scranton Ave. It's our prefer, we own from 64 to 110.
They had an
So the-
RDA to reinforce some
just took the
concrete for a
dirt.
new boat lift,
But-
for a new forklift.
But
And
part of that RDA wasn't what would happen with this,
I don't believe so, no. I'd have to double check that for you.
well, certainly you wouldn't have left it.
No, we
No.
wouldn't have had them stockpiling the fill right there.
No.
Right.
Okay. That's it. I mean, the board can decide.
But it wasn't really an attempt to start it. It was just
No,
trying to
okay,
see.
I know. We understand, Connor. That's it, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I don't really know what to do with this. They're filling on a coastal bank. They're putting another vertical wall. But it's the inner harbor. Everything's a vertical bulkhead in the harbor. So I'm really kind of at a loss. And you did say there was a reduction, and the patio that you're proposing is going where parking was, correct? That's Tom, that question, that was for you, Tom? Okay. And I would just reiterate what Brendan said. I do believe you checked with the building commissioner on having that wall engineered. So you're definitely gonna have to go talk to the building commissioner prior to installing this, just a heads up. Okay, thank you. That's it.
I don't have a problem with this project. I do
Problem with the glass.
I do commend Tom for doing a valiant effort to overcome presumptions.
Right.
I was doing my homework.
You were
trying
trying to
well,
sell it,
well,
Tom.
you really, you've really caught on to, that's what we would like you to argue if that's the case you want to make, rather than just assume that we will assume what it is.
I can show you this other picture here. I mean, as far as walls, this is the wall at the harbor master's office.
Yeah.
Would-
No, I don't have a,
We know,
I don't
we
have
know
a-
what the inner harbor looks like,
yeah,
Tom.
I don't have a problem with the project. I will say, though, I was, when I got out there and kind of figured where 88 and 110 was, and finally parked my car, and I kind of went, oh, when I saw the dirt. And so when you were saying,
And I got a text.
and you, yeah, she got a text right away. And when you're saying, so there's not gonna be any sediment introduced, I'm like, well, let's wait till the next big rain, and then we're gonna have a lot of sediment introduced. So I'm glad,
Could be.
Connor, that you got the message and are protecting it
Oh, yeah,
now.
taking actions to secure that site.
Lori?
I just had one question. And it's probably not really a conservation question, but this is a marine district. So I don't know if picnic tables and all that are part of marine use, so I did think I'd make sure you check with zoning or planning or whoever's in that world. The only thing I really had a concern with for us is that if that's land courted somewhere, there's a document,
We
I
should
really
have
think
it.
we need to have that, because we're permitting something that's, we don't know if it's a public right-of-way, we don't know if it's an easement, and I don't think that we should be permitting things that we don't know if you really own or have rights to that property. And if you have it, I'm not saying you don't have it.
We need
but
to have,
we
we need
need
to
to
have a
have
copy
It has
of
to
it.
be in our
It has to
record.
be in our record. And the other thing, Tom, you know as well as I do that sod does not hold up well at all without irrigation. Are you irrigating this?
Well, you generally don't allow permanent irrigation, but it says you can put irrigation in up for 2 years to,
No, we
Where
let
did 2
irrigation
years
go
come
in for
from?
I think
plants.
I thought I saw in
No,
one of
for
your
plants. That's for starting.
temporary, yeah.
No, temporary for plant material, not for lawns.
Well, it'd
So
have
I
to
just
be,
want to make sure that when you don't want the grass, the drought-tolerant fescue,
Yeah.
and actually, now that I hear that there's going to be picnic tables and everything else, it's going to be mud and then you're going to be coming in to be putting pervious block in. I know that'll be the next thing. I mean, I know how this all works. So if that's the case, I think you should be upfront now, not, I mean, if it's gonna be, or come back to us, but this isn't gonna be grass today and pervious block pavers tomorrow for picnic tables. We will be keeping an eye on it. But we definitely need that land court document.
Wouldn't, wouldn't drought-tolerant fescue make a sturdier
Yes.
base?
Yes. But they want instant gratification, so it's a little green golf course, and then they're gonna be able to use it.
Oh, yes, but there is sod out of fescue sod.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, that, I've seen that. It doesn't always take very
Fescue
well.
sod, as long as it's irrigated, fescue sod does well. As soon as you stop irrigating any sod, over a period of time with wear and tear, it
It just-
dries up
yeah.
and blows away.
Well,
I'm not designing your plan. Tom is.
But he's saying
Yes.
that if we
Yeah.
want them to
Yeah.
plant.
But
Oh, we're gonna make it
Drought
fescue.
tolerance.
Yeah.
any kind of, if it's on the right loam, even a sod should be able to take root and get in, be as permanent as grown from grass if it's on good loam.
All right, anyway,
I don't
that's all. The land court thing was my big issue. That we're permitting something on land that you have a right to.
Tom, we might have to continue this until we get that document. I mean, as long as you produce the document, we'll be, and we know.
You
But
have the
it-
decree or something from land court? I mean, if you can get it that quickly, I mean, can you just, I know you have to make a decision within 21 days, but, or continue it for
Oh, it'll
1
be a
week.
denial without it.
Go before, I mean, we always can continue it until next week. I mean, as long as you're protecting that big, I don't think you're gonna be installing your wall in a week, so we could always continue it just to make sure that we have that documentation, so we're not making a decision on somebody else's land.
Yep.
That would be really bad.
Oh, by the way, did you get we emailed you the file number?
I did, thank you.
Because that hadn't been
Yep.
sent to us directly. I don't know why.
I wasn't on the Concom's email for the last couple of days, so
Well,
I don't know if it came
They didn't
in.
send it to
Well,
us.
I
We
do,
had
you
to
wanna
look
send
for
it to me?
Do you want to know what it is?
No, we got it. No,
Oh.
we got it, but it hadn't been sent to us. They usually send it
A
by
copy
email.
to you. No, I got that email, thank you, Tom.
They're just saying we had to go to their website and find it and
Oh.
download it, and so
Oh,
we sent
yeah,
it.
we have it.
Do we have a butter notification cards? Yes.
Yes.
Kevin? No, my questions went away when someone said that the material I saw down there today was not going to be used in the final product. With that assurance.
Did you hear
And
that?
hopefully that will include
I didn't hear that.
I think he
think
said
they
it wasn't
planning
brought
to
in
use
for
it.
that project.
Huh?
They are planning to use it,
Yeah.
but it
Oh,
came
really?
from a project that they had just finished.
The stuff with all of the asphalt and half of the roof from the house?
There's no butter.
We'll have to check it to see if it's
Okay.
well drained enough to, to be proper fill for it. And
Basically, what Kevin's saying, we don't want construction material in the fill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clean. Good? Courtney?
Yeah, just following through on the sod issue, you will provide documentation from the supplier of the sod that it is indeed a fescue sod?
Yes.
That'll be a condition.
Good.
That's it.
Steve?
No further questions.
Peter?
If you look at wall section B-B,
Mm-hmm.
it shows a existing grade and compacted granular material built up. That's a little bit of a concern. I recognize, and you have listed a lot of pluses to the project, but if everyone in the harbor built up their coastal bank to a vertical wall if you had a surge from a hurricane or storm, there wouldn't be enough capacity for the water to spread out, and it will go up further in flooding. And this is a small area, but if everyone reduced the amount of flood space for water, the surge level of the water would be higher.
I believe that's somewhat of a misconception. That is, the flood zone is designed as an elevation that the water will reach. And actually, just outside, just over the water itself, I say the water will reach elevation 18. Where it comes in, it'll reach only 14. But the flood elevation is not really based on a volume of water that will come into the harbor. It's based on the water that's outside. This expected storm surge out in Vineyard Sound will reach to a particular elevation, and then that storm surge will cause water to go into all of the embayments. It's not determined by volume, but it's determined by elevation. So I don't think that would happen. But I think it'd be right that if the entire harbor were lined with walls front to back, then the water would come in faster, perhaps, but there are also enough, this is one wall. Obviously, he's not gonna put a retaining wall 14 feet high where his boat racks are, because then he would lose his business. And same with the town marina, that they're not gonna build a wall this high. So for most owners, it would be counterproductive to build a retaining wall this up to elevation 14, out to the water or near the water, because actually usually people want to be down at water level, not so high above it.
It's a small area, and there are offsetting things that are good. The reduction of the runoff from the house, and reduction of the pedestrian traffic, and reduction of the impervious, so,
Yeah.
okay, no further
Yeah.
questions.
Mark?
No questions.
Next week?
Are we looking for a continuance then?
Tom, I think the board would feel more comfortable, at least with a one-week continuance, so we can get the documentation, so we're not approving something on property that's not under the control of your applicant, your client. Okay?
All right, we'll do that.
Are you asking? Are you?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. On behalf of the applicant, we'd request a one-week continuance in order to get the documentation on the land ownership.
I'll make a motion to continue this until, what's the week from now? May 1st.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote to continue this till May 1st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Connor, if you could get that in ASAP. All right.
What?
You probably don't need to be here. We could
I
we
am
could
going to be
grill-
here next week.
We could grill Tom a little more, though.
You might need some moral support, though.
Yeah, Tom might need some moral support.
Okay, next up, continued hearings under a notice of intent. Gerald Aronson, trustee, Sandwich Road, map 0901005002, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a single-family house, deck, stairs for water access, Title V septic system, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, utilities, and landscaping. Quorum,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, it's Mark, Peter, Maury, Betsy, Kevin, and Courtney.
That's right, you were.
I wasn't on the quorum, so I will abstain except for the purposes of,
Okay,
Could you
back to this again.
just ask? Stay and talk into that microphone so that we don't have to come again.
I'm not on the quorum.
Okay. And come on, page 2.
No.
How you holding up, Susan?
Somebody else's.
Okay.
gonna ask, Connor about that.
Jamie, are you still acting as
This
chair?
is still everybody
I'm
else's.
sorry?
Yep, you're
Yes.
still acting as chair?
Yeah.
See, I'm
Okay,
not-
that's
If that's
fine.
okay.
not-
No, no, that's
No,
fine.
that's what I said.
Yep, that's fine.
It's
I won't-
definitely okay.
Moderator, if nothing else.
Referee.
I think we got the right one.
Frank forgot about us.
Okay, super.
Mr. Ronson, please, make sure you lean into that microphone. It's,
Will do.
please and thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gerald Aronson, trustee of the AEC Trust. I believe we all met before, a few weeks ago, and continued. And one of the, I guess, the major issue, there's a handout which is, I put together, which is a whole bunch of answers to the questions and supplemental information that we put together. And probably the biggest issue was the offset from the pond. Originally, we had a 75-foot offset off of mean low water, as described under the provision for land underwater. And obviously, it was brought up that maybe we should be using the definition in the description of banks, and the inland bank in particular, where high water is either inflection point or mean high water, and low water is again mean low water. So in, keeping with moving forward, quite honestly, and we sat down, looked at the drawings, tried to figure out how could we make this work with the existing house design. And we've revised the drawing, which you have now. So now we're showing the, and I will walk over here.
You can use the mouse also.
I don't think it's that clear if you use the
Okay.
mouse, but.
Well, the red line is the 75-foot offset off of mean high water now. The line behind it is 50 feet off of the defined vegetative line. So the more restrictive becomes the 75-foot offset off of mean high water. So what we did is we reconfigured the site, or the site plan, the home, and moved it back. Actually turned it somewhat and moved it back. So we're now clearing the 75-foot offset line, and maintaining the left, well, in this case, the upper and lower lines are the 50-foot offset off of two existing wetland situations. So, so anyway, all this is defined narrative piece to this introduction, and so that was the major issue that was brought up. So we have moved the actual home back behind the 75-foot line, left adequate space to construct the foundation and the entire facility with no disturbance to the existing land. To us, that's a very important piece. There is an existing kind of, not really a path, but there's an existing area where you can walk up to the right of the proposed home. The land goes, it's quite a slope from the street down to the house. We go from elevation 64 at the street down to elevation 50. Then it goes back up to elevation 57 at its max and drops down into the water. The land also slopes off as you face the water. If you're walking along the water's edge from the high point, it's sloping down and away from the pond. So any drop of water that actually falls on the land
will go away from the pond, not into the pond. The only thing that could go into the pond if it was on the bank itself, but that's all vegetated. So we've addressed that situation, which I think was the primary concern, to follow the regulations. The second piece was clarity of drawings. The drawings themselves were getting overwhelming, truthfully. There were so many lines on the drawings, and we split it into two. There's a part one, and this is part two. Part one is the existing conditions, just so you can look at the topos and so on. And that also shows the 75-foot offset and the 50-foot offsets from the wetlands. Item C is flagging. There were a number of questions regarding the existing color coding. The place has got probably 100 flags, if it has one, from the original environmental consultant doing the wetlands designations to GAF Engineering, who's our surveyor, doing various offsets, and it became, very complicated. They used all different flags. They were marked, but some of the markings have torn off because they've been there a while. The flags are still there. So they put in color coding on both of the plans so you can follow exactly on the site what belongs to what. D is staking. The proposed residence was restaked and reflagged to now represent exactly what's on the drawing. Item 2 was there was a question about the lot coverage. The existing lot encompasses 83,564 square feet, of which 80,235 are upland. The footprint of the proposed residence, including decks, entrance stairs, and greenhouse area, there's a greenhouse area on the front, is approximately 4,800 square feet, resulting in a lot coverage of 5.8%. There was another question regarding trees. We made a rough estimate of trees. This is a heavily wooded lot that's over almost 2 acres in size. But we made a rough estimate of trees, 5 inches in caliber, roughly 6 feet above grade, and there are approximately 420 trees on the land. An estimated 35 of them will be removed in creating the dwelling site. The AEC Trust has currently planted 140 trees and shrubs outside of the 100-foot zone and intends to plant an additional 100 to 150 plantings along the driveway and around the dwelling once the project is completed. So, we're putting a lot back. It's going to be installation of access stairs to the water. One of the things we're requesting is permission to put access stairs, which were depicted before. Stairs are going to sit on 4 to 5 pilings, depending on the final engineering. 2 or 3 at the top of the bank, 2 at the bottom. And the entire staircase will span. It'll be steel, construction galvanized steel, with cast iron treads. But it will span above the existing bank. All of the treads are slotted. They allow the light to pass through, so vegetation can grow underneath, air can grow underneath, and we're also planning on planting blueberry bushes or similar kinds of appropriate plantings along each side of the stair, just following the stair down to kind of create a captive situation. An important thing here is the construction methodology, because how are we going to build this within the site, not affect anything else? Because of the topography, the basement of the house is at grade, the beginning of the basement. So the land slopes down, and right at the beginning of the house, we're at elevation 50, and that will be the basement slab. So we're actually going to excavate the entire site from inside the foundation. We do not have to go around the outside. It would be harder to do it, and we wouldn't want to do it. So the machinery will not be going outside of the actual foundation. In addition, on the lower right corner, this sort of hexagonal piece, that's a greenhouse. The greenhouse will be sitting 2 feet above grade. The floor grade of the house is elevation 60. The basement level is elevation 50. So what happens is the greenhouse floor will be concrete, probably set on pilings, spanning just 2 feet above the existing grade. So without the greenhouse, and there's a deck that runs approximately 40 feet long along the back of the house, or the pond side of the house, the deck is 14 feet deep. So the actual foundation line of the house is 18 to 20 feet back from the 75-foot offset. The only place where it comes close is there's a little jut on the, as you go up, to the upper side of the house. That's a bump out where a bedroom is, which can be readily excavated from the inside and taken care of. There's still adequate space there. So we are committed, truthfully, to not putting any kind of machinery up and around at all. And we would be crossing into, or potentially only in that one corner if we did, crossing the 75-foot line. But we have about a 20-foot workspace inherent to what we're doing. Obviously, the deck would have to be built, so the deck would have, some things once it gets built, but the actual foundation line of the house is way back from the pond. Okay, item 6 is cut and fill, and there is an error in this. It's just due to the topography of the site and the fact that the land slopes back. So we go from elevation 50 on the right side approaching the pond, we're going up fairly linearly to elevation 57. But as you go to the left, as you're aiming towards the pond, everything slopes back down. So there isn't that much cut. It says 435 yards, it's actually 135 yards. That's an error, a typo. Refill and grading around the foundation wall, using the existing material, changing a little bit of the grade where the juts are towards the wetlands, will basically use up. But we should pretty much have a net zero of material. Signage, there was a question on signage. We have installed a sign that says 1487 Sandwich Road, Lot 2, and also put the Mass DEP. We have the Mass DEP registration number now. 8 is the National Heritage and Endangered Species Program. We have gotten the sign-off from them. That is included in your packet. So they've signed off that there's no adverse effect of the project. 9 is in front of the stairs in a small area. We have some very small grandchildren, and this is extremely rocky. And the reason it's so rocky is that back in 2004, the U.S. Air Force actually put a cofferdam in the pond all the way along this lot and both adjacent lots, dug the whole place up, and put, zero-valent iron, which is basically pure iron, it's cast iron, granules into the pond, mixed it up, and put it back down. And what ends up happening is the silt kind of drops down, and the stones sit up at the top, and it's become very, very rocky. 2 to 3 inch rocks, not big ones. And we would like permission to clear just manually. I don't see any great way of doing it beyond going in with a plastic rake and kind of carefully raking into little groups and taking them out manually. And so it's going to be something that would be done over a little period of time to at least kind of create something that's much more walkable. Last thing is septic system. A preliminary a septic design has been submitted to the Board of Health, and they have the application. So I think that covers all the bases that we had talked about previously. And if there are any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Yep,
Okay. You want to start?
Yeah, thanks very much. I know you and the staff
Yeah.
know that. At
We
the
went
last
over it in
hearing, we
detail, and-
suggested that you work with the staff, and I know they work with you, and I appreciate you
I think
covering.
I think it's a very workable compromise, truthfully. I really do. I think, obviously one can get into an argument if one wants to. I didn't want to.
Well, I don't want to either.
I know, and
We want you
none
to
of us
enjoy
want
your
to.
site.
It was one of these situations where
And to protect
we
the
wanted to
environment.
do something that was right and works, and it did, so that was fine.
No questions?
Kevin? Courtney?
Just a quick question. Once you put the foundation in, how are you going to backfill the foundation on
The backfill over, well, we're still deciding if we're gonna, either way, there will be some backfill.
Yeah,
We might use insulated concrete forms, which allow you to have it very, very close, because you only have to single-side brace those, but we'll see. The walls are about 9 feet. We have a Cat 950, a big loader, that we're gonna bring to excavate this out, so we'll just reach up above the wall and carefully dump the stuff back in, leave it wide enough so we can compact as we bring it up. So everything's gonna be done from the inside. We're not gonna go around on the outside to do it.
you've got it figured out that you can backfill that wall.
Yeah, we can backfill,
Without,
we can
having to send a
waterproof the
machine
wall and then backfill the wall from inside without a problem.
So you would do all that before you put the deck on?
Yeah, the entire foundation will be finished. We then will come up and put in, because we can come up beside the foundation and put in the pilings for the greenhouse and the deck.
Okay.
And then we're all set with concrete work, off we go.
So that satisfies my questions. Thank you.
Peter?
I have a question on the answers to questions and supplemental information, .9.
.9, okay.
You are talking about 2 to 3 foot diameter rocks?
No,
or-
oh, is it foot? Oh, excuse me. 2 typos. I thought there was 1. That's inch,
Okay,
this big.
okay.
No,
No
no,
further
these aren't. Oops. No, it's just awful.
Okay.
It's awful to try to walk in there right now. It's just, and it's dangerous for little kids because the rocks are small, the spaces are about the size of their foot, and it's easy for them to just twist an ankle and fall down. Just trying to clean it up a little.
Is there any intent to use that area at the foot of the stairs as a beach area?
Down in front of the stairs? Sort of, but right now, there's no beach. The water is all the way in. The water is really high.
What I'm
And-
wondering is if you, I don't know what the stone situation is down there, but if you have to take out quite a few,
It's actually on the beach where the government didn't dig it up. They were about the mean high water level.
Yeah.
Is where they excavated. When we first bought the property, that was about the elevation of the pond. So it's not bad, there are some stones. And then it gets to be just a blanket. And you can see the color changes. If you actually look at this on Google Earth, you'll see in front of this property, a big long, it's 500 feet long, a different color in the water, and that's what that's from.
I think it might be nice to sort of show on the plan how much area you want to go in and
Well,
really clean up the
honestly,
beach.
I had instructed my surveyor to do so, and I realized that he didn't. But it's about, we're talking probably 40 feet wide, but we'll definitely put it on the plan, and about 30 feet deep. It's just enough so, they can get in there and splash around more than anything.
I don't know right about putting the blueberries next to your stairs there.
Well, it doesn't have to be blueberries, I mean, it's just
Whatever
something.
it is, it's something, you might want to mark that on the plan too. It's kind of
I
hard to
understand.
dig into a hill without doing some damage to the hill. So you got to be sort of careful.
In
with
this
that. You
case,
will,
if
but you gotta be
you,
careful.
I don't know if you've been out there, but if you look
I have.
where the stairs were, it's pretty, there's not much there. It's more pine needles and that's, you know, it's,
I'm just thinking it
but, you know, I
can
understand.
create a source for erosion if you dig
Right.
huge holes and drop.
No, we're looking at, you know, just hand dug, you know, we're not looking to disturb anything. You know, so.
That's all.
I'm gonna make a motion, close the hearing, and take it under advisement.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion from the board? Anything from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of closing the hearing and taking it under advisement?
Nothing, aye,
Say aye.
aye,
Aye.
Opposed?
aye.
Unanimous, so moved.
Good luck.
Steve is back in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep, I got you.
Oh, I came down with this yesterday. I thought this was gonna be
This is a 1 gallon pot.
speechless evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aronson.
Other,
Thank you.
thank you. Other business, approved Troop 40 campout at Souza Conservation Area.
The annual camp out at Souza Conservation Area. We've been contacted by the troop leader. They want to come this weekend. We'll send
Standard.
them the standard letter.
Move
I'll
to
make a motion to
approve.
approve.
We also,
I'll second it
actually,
then.
we also make sure he lets the.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Courtney, aye.
Janie seconded.
He can't
Court,
second, he's the chair.
introduce it.
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
That's what I heard, but I can't hear all the way down there, so maybe I
What?
missed somebody.
It got done.
Unanimous, so moved. All right, order conditions. First up, Ray Samuels, 86 Weston Road, North Falmouth, Mass.
That was a typo. That was actually an extension, so that's already been sent out. It wasn't an order of conditions. My apologies.
Which one?
Samuels.
So it doesn't count?
It doesn't count. Or just stand up. Yeah. Go on to Little Lane, Jamie.
I don't have any notes.
Everybody seemed to like it. Move the house back, did everything we asked them to do. Probably works around here. Except for the green ink.
Courtney, Kevin, Betsy, Jamie, Steve, Peter, Mark.
What are we doing?
Little Lane,
That was just a revision.
I'm sorry, Weston Road.
No, we're on 21 Little Lane.
21 Little
We're
Lane.
on 21 Little Lane.
Right.
And that is, just, was it amended? Just to revise, right?
21 Little Lane is amended,
Yeah, amended to just revise the footprint of the house and revise the mitigation.
Oh, right.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You wanna
Opposed?
stand over there and I'll write?
Unanimous. Next up, Noah and Caroline Clements, 21 Little Lane, East Falmouth, Mass.
That's
No,
the
we
one we
just did
just
that.
did.
Just did that.
Sorry,
It's okay, Mr.
Did we
Chairman.
do did we
No,
do
I s-
Weston Road?
I skipped.
Yeah, Weston Road was wrong.
Weston Road was an
Yeah.
extension. We accidentally put it on under vote orders of conditions.
My mistake.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. No, that was
All
our
right.
mistake.
Kevin Skelly, 258 Edgewater
Same
Drive, East Falmouth, Mass.
Same quorum.
That was just another amended, amended order of conditions to change the construction methodology to
Oh, that's right.
construct the seawall.
Upland rather than
Yes.
downland. Move to
Move to
approve.
accept as discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Jen, are they all the same?
Oh, we don't know.
Michael and Brenda Doyle, 318 Acapesket Road, East Falmouth, Mass.
All right, let me find that one. That was an amend.
Oh,
That was the one you guys didn't want as an amendment.
Oh, yeah, bank stabilization. But it's the bank stabilization, well,
Yeah, but we,
yeah, just, that was my fault that I didn't catch that, so.
yeah, well, I mean, she actually did a very good job.
She did an excellent
In
job with the bank
The
stabilization.
presentation and what she had on the plan. So I don't think we had any, did we have any conditions?
no.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It's unanimous. Patrick and Phyllis McDevitt, number 5, North Chop Lane, East Falmouth.
Courtney, Betsy, Jamie, Steve, Peter, and Kevin.
Not me?
What is this one?
And Mark. Mark's down at the bottom, sorry. There was a scribble and, yeah, you're on too.
Was he here for all the hearings?
He wasn't here the first
Yeah,
one.
so-
Yeah, then he's not on it. If he's down in the bottom, it means that I didn't do it all the way across. So just so you understand how it works.
Two meetings.
So Mark.
In case you were wondering.
At least.
I was
how it
wondering.
works.
Thank you, I got it now.
I mean, he
This is
addressed
the
everything we
revetment
had.
construction and the revised to put the old mitigation plantings on the plan.
Right.
I don't believe there was anything really on this.
We have a clear construction.
No.
Like today.
Time of year?
No, yeah, it's the reconstruction of the existing revetment and adding all of the mitigation plantings that somehow disappeared on the property throughout the years.
Move to accept as discussed.
To decide whether it ever existed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Stephen and Stephanie Kasock, 39 Jetty Lane, West Falmouth, Mass.
That was your invasive removal project. You heard the staff's concerns. The staff does not feel that you should be allowing the invasive removal in your B zone and replacing it with turf lawn or wildflower meadows. But that's the staff's position on the matter.
Quorum? Yeah, I'm sorry. Skip that step.
Peter, Betsy, Kevin, and Courtney.
You can show you're paying attention.
I knew nothing about it.
So we saying we want to see more plants? Is that what we're saying?
I'd like to see
Less grass.
less grass,
What is less grass?
more shrubs.
I get that, but there's 4,200 square feet of grass being proposed in your B zone.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I actually took this out today to see, and it wasn't explicitly, these are our regulations, explicitly as you said. I mean, I understand where you're going, but they do allow restorations in the velocity zone that,
Actually, your land subject to coastal storm flowage
I
regulations
just looked it up.
does say that vegetation removal in a velocity zone is prohibited.
It does not say prohibited.
It does too say prohibited. I will show you where.
I'll show you, I have it marked.
So do I.
Somehow, I think the wise course for the rest of us is to be quiet.
Let Betsy and I battle it out.
Not a fight for us.
Betsy, I'm looking at, and this is just the staff's, I mean, the staff's, okay,
10.384D.
D.
That's where I'm looking also.
which result in alteration to vegetative cover, activities in their ancillary uses in velocity zones which result in alteration to vegetative cover, interruptions in the supply of sediment to other wetlands, and major changes in the form of a dune or a beach will have an adverse effect on said landform's ability to provide storm damage prevention and flood control, and therefore are prohibited.
It does say, notwithstanding the provisions of FWR 10.384A through D,
Yeah,
the commission may permit the following activities, providing the applicant demonstrates to the satisfaction of the commission best available practices are
Oh,
utilized to
I
minimize.
see where you're going.
See where I'm going?
Yeah, I see with that one.
All right, so,
We'll call that a draw.
so,
No, I mean, didn't look that far down, so I've gotta read it, Betsy.
well, I did because I wondered where you were coming from. And I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I would like to make a few suggestions. One
Okay.
is that I think there are 4 trees coming down in the A zone, so I think there should be 4 more trees added in this lawn area. Most of the vegetation that most of the woody vegetation that they're proposing is fairly small. So, I mean, small in terms of size, small
Okay.
plants.
I just wanna let the commission know, because this is what I hear and what the commission hears from the various representatives, is they have the right to remove and do whatever they want within the B zone, because your regulations do not prohibit it, and that is not
No.
correct. You have discretion whether to allow activities or not within the B zone. But I've heard multiple times saying, well, it's in the B zone and I'm allowed to do this. It's almost like by right. And that is not how your regulations are written. That is not how your council,
Are you telling,
I'm
are you
telling all
telling
of
the
you.
others? I
I'm telling
understand
all
that.
of you. So, and, the courts have sided with the commission when you just, make a discretionary decision in the B zone. Here is the court case. So I just wanna caution you that we're seeing more and more of these vegetative removal projects where they're removing invasives, which we all agree that removing invasives is a good thing in the long run, but replacing it with turf lawn or replacing them with wildflower meadows and going for the gut shot saying, oh, well, we're gonna bring in the bees and the butterflies, is not replacing the habitat, the wildlife habitat value that those stands of invasives do provide. And they do provide a level of wildlife habitat value. They provide a food source. They provide cover. I'm not saying they're great, they're not native, but I am saying that what they are proposing to replace it with is not the same habitat value.
But I'm also gonna say that most of these invasives are not deep-rooted, and they do not provide the protection.
And turf lawn is deep-rooted?
No, this is a replacement of many of the invasives with a lot of woody indigenous.
I'm not saying that.
We're
I'm
not
saying they're proposing to
Jen,
replace the
we're not
bee zone.
saying, Courtney already suggested that there should perhaps be more. That's what, we're in that point of discussing it as a board.
Okay, out of the 4,200 square feet of turf lawn they're
Jen,
proposing, how much
Jen,
more
would you let
shrubs?
the people on the quorum
will.
discuss it? Who else is on the quorum? I know the 3 of us are. Who's the 4th person? So Peter, what do you have to say?
No pressure.
I'm taking a stand on this one.
Okay. Courtney?
Storm foliage. How about storm foliage?
I agree with Jen. I think we, as a commission, are gonna take a little harder look at this stuff when we're holding a hearing. And I am concerned, like Jen is, and I know some others on this commission are, that, by sort of allowing for this, although there's a place for this, wildflower meadows and grasses and all that stuff, but, if we don't, I think when you have a situation where there's a lot of invasives and woody growth, and that provides a certain habitat value, and now that goes away, and you're replacing it with wildflowers and low grasses, you've lost the habitat value. And I think that maybe what we need to do as a commission, when we see these projects, is to insist that a reasonable ratio between bushy, woody growth that was actually taken out is put back. And they can have some open areas of meadow, but I think it's, Jen's right. I think we go down a path here. That all said, shame on us for not demanding that before we close the hearing. So now we have a conundrum here.
Courtney, I wouldn't say we
I
didn't.
discussed it at the first hearing.
We discussed it at the first hearing,
Yeah.
and this is what they came back in. And all I said was, this is enough information to make a decision. Now, the
That's your
decision-
visual.
Now, the decision might be that we want to condition it for further vegetation,
Right.
Yeah, that's fine.
and that's where
That's
I
the
see
purpose
us
of this
going.
discussion.
Right.
So what do the regulations allow, and then if they conform to that, so.
It gives you discretion. It doesn't
Discretion.
allow, you know,
Unfortunately,
it doesn't
it leaves the discretion up to us.
yes, it doesn't specifically say a ratio. It doesn't say that, you know, you are required to allow all the lawn. It's not saying that you, you know, are required to allow patios. It's giving the board the discretion to determine what you would like done in your B
But
zone.
you have to be specific, so
Are you
you
saying
tell them you want a
B, or are
specific
you saying
reduction.
B?
B and V. I'm saying, okay, so first of all, Betsy, I'm talking about two different things. One, I'm talking about, you know, how I interpret your land subject to coastal storm flowage regulations, which means the prohibited, you know, what I see is your alterations to vegetative cover is prohibited in your V zone. That's under your land subject to coastal storm flowage regulations. The discretion lies in your resource area buffer regulations when we're talking about the B zone. So if you guys look at this, the yellow is your B zone. So this is A over here, and that yellow line. That yellow line, I don't know who's on the forum, so I'm just gonna dump it right here.
They're down there, except for Peter.
Peter, come over here. So it's Courtney, Kevin, Betsy, and Peter, right?
Let me move.
So, the
Let me
yellow
move Peter.
line,
Here.
Okay.
the yellow line to the left
Is
is
the
your
A
A
zone.
zone,
This is the B zone.
and this is your B buffer zone.
But
And then
it's-
the whole thing is
But
your
it's
Z
all
zone.
I'm
within
so
the
bullshit
velocity
Yeah,
about
and
this
it's
one,
all
but I
within the
would-
velocity
There's
zone.
nothing I could.
Blue outline, where the pink hash mark is in, because I couldn't decide what color I wanted to use, is the amount of invasive vegetation that's out there now that they're removing and proposing to replace with turf lawn. Okay? There are a few little shrubs over here and meadow grasses, but the majority of it, and it is approximately 4,280 square feet of area that's proposing to be turf lawn. And I'm saying that the board has the discretion, and as your staff, I would like to caution you, because we are seeing more and more of these plans where these invasive removal projects are coming in, and they're proposing wildflower meadows and turf lawn. And when you make a determination, you know, we have to, you know,
Well,
you can't just come up, you know,
it would be helpful if they could say in the Zone B, with the removal of the invasives, there would be a certain percentage of shrubs to replace the invasives and a certain percentage of lawn. And I don't know what that percentage is on this
That's
drawing.
subject to your discretion.
That's
it's
subject to
up
you.
to the board's
So what would
discretion.
you like to suggest?
Uh,
put out something, and then we can discuss it.
50% of the B mitigation, invasives, that area should be at least 50% shrubs instead of lawn. That's,
Yeah.
I just want to caution the line, because if we, and I get what you're saying, and I appreciate the board listening to your staff, but we're seeing the progression in these plans go down. And I'm gonna tell you, right now, there are a couple that are sitting in the office that you now have in your packets that are proposing this type.
If I
So
may,
I'm just
separately from this, we
cautious.
need to
Yeah.
have some discussion about these invasive removal projects and
Correct.
under the guise of something else, and potentially the mitigation required. Courtney?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that we have the discretion to do it, and so, you know, we have the power sitting here as we deliberate to suggest or make the changes in the conditions. My gut feeling, I go back to the early days of when I was on this commission, and there was a sort of rule of thumb that a commission didn't design projects for applicants. Applicants design projects for us to agree to. And so what I'm saying, and I don't disagree with you, Betsy, what I'm saying though, going forward, is we should make sure they design it before we close the hearing, and they design it
Yeah,
to
but
our
we're not there.
satisfaction.
We're not there now. We've closed the hearing.
I understand.
Proposing 50%. What I would say is, if it turns out we're comfortable with 50%, they have to come in with a new plan
Correct.
that shows where they're gonna put those plants.
Oh, absolutely.
And more trees.
And your 4 more trees.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, we're where we are, it's not,
yeah, so we're conditioning it. And we're not designing it, we're conditioning it, and then they have to come back with a new plan to reflect
yeah,
that.
they can't start to work until they have a plan that meets staff's approval, right?
No, this is coming before you.
It's the board has to decide that.
You'll see the plan.
The only thing that I would like for us to be able to say within ourselves in making these judgments, about 50% is fine. But we don't want to have, we do not want to say that we're gonna allow none, and we do not want to say we demand 100%.
Well, I think it's gonna be site-specific.
Yes,
This happens to be one that's in the velocity
Exactly.
zone.
And in addition, I think one of the things is we have to listen to staff on this stuff. But you also gotta, make the hard choice decision that whoever owns this piece of property is putting a pile of dough into, taking out an awful lot of invasives. And we want to be able to hold them to greatest extent. Certainly not letting them get away with anything in the A, but in the B, we should be somewhat flexible, although even I can notice that it seems as though in the past few meetings, we've had a number of very attractive projects, but at the heart of them, someone's basically putting in a really pretty piece of property, but I'm not sure it meets our regulations. So, I don't think I guess what I'm saying is you can't just put down, we're creating our own rule, it's 50%.
No, we're not. We're saying
allow
for this,
some
for this
judgment, but
particular piece property, that's what I mean, Peter threw it out. I think that sounds fair enough.
This particular piece of property is in the velocity zone.
Yeah.
Staff is coming up, we're kind of throwing some ideas around that we want to kind of approach the board with to try to, in the future, manage these types of projects. I do want these designers and consultants to come in and kind of give the board, and I've talked about this, I just have to find the time to have them come in and give you before, during, and after presentations of some of these projects, because some of them do come out beautifully, absolutely beautifully. They look awful going in, but they do come out beautifully.
Yeah, but we're trying to make a decision on this property. This is what was discussed, I think agreed upon, 50%. A plan has to come in. In addition, the plan has to show, and she suggested this, and I think it's much better than these little rocks here and there. It has to show a little split
Fence.
rail fence, a low split rail fence.
Single rail fence is what we usually require.
Single rail
Or
fence.
boulders,
Yeah, because that.
Rather
they
than-
could,
yeah, but-
or boulders.
Because the issue
Well,
was
the
either
boulders
a
aren't
rail
gonna work.
fence or more closely spaced
She
rocks.
suggested it.
Clear
She suggested
definition.
the single rail fence.
I think I suggested at the first hearing.
Are we comfortable that we've got 50% now of woody vegetation, native stuff to go back in instead of turf lawn? Are we comfortable with the remainder being turf lawn, or do we want some other kind of thing? In other words, this is now gonna be mowed, so are we comfortable at all with turf anywhere? If they wanna have something other than woody vegetation, is there another ground cover that would prefer rather than turf lawn?
And just like I said to Mike McGrath last week, I'm not a big fan of turf lawn, but if you follow the nitrogen bylaw, which they have to follow, because It's
we'll go
part of
down
the
Jetty Lane and
regulation.
check that out
I'll
all the
go
time.
down Jetty Lane and check it out.
It's illegal, it's private road.
You think I don't know that? I mean, grass would work as well as any other ground cover in terms of its
No, I understand.
function.
But grass isn't providing the wildlife habitat value that they're touting that these wildflower meadows do for the butterflies and bees and pollinators. So I think that's what Courtney's getting at, is instead of
Well, he
turf
said
lawn.
another ground cover.
Well, yeah,
which is
a
not-
ground
yeah,
cover
which
is a
not
meadow.
That'd be wildflower meadow and all
Yeah,
that stuff?
that's what he's
I'd rather
talking
see
about.
that than turf lawn.
Because they do stand up there and say that the wildflower meadow,
That's where their meadow is, where the turf lawn is. I'm happy with that.
Well, the guy that was supposed to, the thing we tabled, the lawyer was quite proud of the fact that the turf
No,
provided
we're not
habitat
going there.
for insects.
Don't go there tonight.
so right now I have 50% shrubs within the lawn area, 4 additional trees, single rail fence, and now we have the other 22,140 square feet to deal with.
Yeah, and I think the sizes of the plants are a little limited, a little small. I mean, we're not in most of them are 1 gallon size.
Do we know what a 1 gallon size looks like?
Yes,
Or it just happens to have
Yeah.
one.
Oh.
I mean, I would, so when the plan comes back in, I would like that to be beefed up. This is not an area that, I mean, this is an area that gets a fair amount of wind, but there are some lovely,
She did revise the
Groves.
plant, she did revise the gallon sizes.
not too much.
Well, I know that, but
And the other side of that is the smaller plants have a better chance of survivability.
This is not a site that it's gonna be stressed that much, because you've got a lot of vegetation
Right, true.
seaward of it.
Yep. I would rather see, in that area, I'd rather see no lawn, I'd rather see, if that's where they want their wildflower meadow, that's where they get their wildflower meadow. Then they've got their wildflower meadow. But, you know, I'm just one of us in it, 9:00.
Kevin?
I'm perfectly comfortable with the 50%.
Me too. Are you comfortable?
Yes.
I'm gonna make a motion to accept as discussed.
Wait a minute, I need to clarification on one thing, Betsy, that you said. So you want to beef up the 1-gallon containers, so the ratio right now is, she's got 111 shrubs that are 1-gallon containers. We have 8 shrubs that are 5-gallon containers. And we have 20 shrubs that are 3-gallon containers.
Yeah, so let's say.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
So it's like a 3 to 1.
Another 16 for 3-gallon and another 31 for 1-gallon.
4 to 1.
Yeah, so we have 142. We have 3-gallon is 10, 10, and 16, so 36 in the 3-gallon, 142 in the 1-gallon, and 8 in the 5-gallon.
Here's what I'd like to see. None in the 1-gallon.
Ooh.
What'd she say?
No 1-gallon.
They're the ones that live.
50% in the 2-gallon, and the rest above that. And they can decide, they can come, but we're not designing it. They can come back.
So you want, repeat that, 50% 2-gallon,
Yeah,
and then the rest
above,
okay.
including, I mean, Surety has some 5-gallon.
Maury, can you get 2-gallon containers?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So we're all right with the turf.
No, you've got, and you are okay with your turf lawn?
Yep.
Okay.
If they want to give us a wildflower meadow, we would accept that.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
Does your motion stand?
Yeah, so my motion,
Your second stand? We have a motion,
I'll second it.
no, it's
we
already
have a
seconded.
second. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting as discussed, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Oh, that was easy.
So I have a question. When a
Can we,
project's,
can we come back, can we go to the question after we do the yacht club?
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
when a project is being built, are we allowed on that property?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
If it's open.
If the order of
long as the
conditions
order's
is still
open.
open.
Yeah, if the order of conditions is open, I wouldn't, if there's a big construction site, I would caution the board not to walk onto a construction site with flip-flops and no hard hat, but,
When I've gone, like when we had a tight tank out on Drift Road, I was running by and I said, hey, are you doing such and such? And they went, yeah, let me show you.
I've run by many
have to walk
projects
in.
and stopped and said hi, so, yes.
Yeah.
Moving on. Falmouth Yacht Club, 0 Clinton Ave, 46B,
Same for
0202000H, Falmouth, Mass.
Quorum is Courtney, Kevin, Betsy, Jamie, Steve, Peter, Mark.
It's not you.
It's kind of straightforward.
Yeah, it's the, beach maintenance, and is there the nourishment component?
500 cubic yards.
Yeah, there was, because they did do 600, now they want 500.
Beach, cubic yards of beach nourishment, and we'll let them apply it. I think it's once, or they can divide it up annually. I don't think it was 500 annually. And then, or divide by 3, and then it's just, their beach maintenance activities. But I'd say 10% of the rack needs to be left for the shorebirds.
Is there a time of year for that area?
No, they didn't have a time of year restriction, I don't believe.
We good?
how did they determine 10% of the rack line?
You guys determined it a while ago.
Okay.
Right.
Eyeball.
I'll tell you where it came from. I sat in a discussion about the beach plan, the beach maintenance plan, which was not in front of us, it was in front of the public. And
Somebody have an
I must have
elastic.
said something about it, being concerned about it, and somebody in the back said, well, here's what they do in Florida, they don't break all the,
Oh, yeah.
Leave
no.
10%.
they leave 10%. So that's where the 10%
I
came
think that,
from.
yeah, I
Yeah,
remember you came up with the 10%.
Well, that's where I came it from.
Where you got it.
Yes.
And Palm Beach puts their 10% in
In where?
the next town.
Yeah,
We sent
probably.
a thank you letter.
We need a motion and a second.
We haven't made a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Opposed? Unanimous.
Before we adjourn, we have a housekeeping thing.
Oh, yeah,
We
we're
have to
tabling.
A table thing we gotta resolve.
Table of things, so we're gonna,
Okay.
So we need to
untable
untable it, and we need to continue it, correct?
to the 1st of May.
So
Okay.
moved.
Can we send a certified letter?
Wouldn't the motion be to just,
Council has been under a lot of pressure. so-
First to untable it.
I make a motion to
I'll
untable.
move to untable.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to untable it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. We're unanimous on everything.
I make a
Perfect.
motion to continue it till May 1st.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue it to May 1st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You can stay by yourself. We're adjourned.